Two things real quick. One, in the spirit of Black Friday, for the next 2 weeks, my entire store is 15% off. Also, I created a ton of new designs, and you can now get new t-shirts in sizes from small to 3XL and in up to 8 different colors. Click the link in the description to check that out.
But with the transcendental argument, I mean, I really don't even see how that follows, because I don't see how anyone holds to, at least to, like, are you atheist, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, but what about the transcendental? You said, I don't see how it follows. You don't see how the transcendental argument follows, or what?
Well, I don't see how it follows in the works of using it against someone like an atheist. Like, do you believe in, like, objective morals?
No.
Well, like, obviously, then, like, how could they give the argument of, like, objective morals exist, God's the necessary precondition for objective morals? It's like, obviously, they're not going to agree that, like, objective morals exist. Like, do you believe that logic exists objectively or something? Or do you think anything exists objectively? Exactly. So,
Oh, well, well, no. For you asked me about logic, and then you
oh, yeah, my bad.
said a
My
second
bad.
thing, and I was saying no to. Do I think anything exists? So, yeah, I mean, I think fundamental particles exist.
I mean, objectively.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what you mean by objectively. So people who I think they're called nominalist, and there's also like mereological nihilism. These are, from what I understand, schools of thought that say things like collections of matter are just given names by convention and they aren't real. So a chair doesn't really exist. And then there are different degrees to which you take that to. So you can maybe believe that, well, fundamental particles are literally irreducible, so they objectively exist. The name we give them happens to be subjective, but they objectively exist. Some other physicists say, actually, we can reduce those fundamental particles to just the wave function, and that's the only thing that really exists. So I don't know what you would call that, but there are people that think that. Now, if by objective you mean is like mind independent, then the planet Earth objectively exists, even if you hold to a nominalism, for example.
But what about mathematics? Would mathematics objectively, even a nominal? I mean, in your worldview, mathematics isn't objective.
Well, it doesn't objectively exist. I don't think integers are real things. And this transcendental argument, I think, falls apart when you try to describe how it is that this eternal mind grounds things. You just run into very obvious contradictions. I don't know if they're contradictions necessarily, but I can talk to you about them.
Yeah, sure. And then after that,
Sure.
I would like to talk to you with what I originally was going to come up here with, which is why I believe God is real, which I'm going to tell you. But yeah.
Sure. So take the claim 2 + 2 = 4. Is that true? Yes. Will it ever be false? No. Therefore, it's an eternal truth. Now, how is it that humans come to know true propositions? Through their mind. If there are eternal truths, there must be an eternal mind. That is essentially how I understand this type of argument to go. The problem with that is, and I had a big discussion about this on YouTube, where I got a lot of feedback on it. So 2 + 2 = 4 is literally only true in a certain base system. If you change your base system to something else, then 2 + 2 can equal 11, or I think it can equal 100 in some cases. And there were people that were telling me that that's not true, and so I spoke about how I got that wrong, but then some other people who wrote hundreds of words in YouTube comments describing this. Most of it went over my head, but what they're effectively saying is, look, 2 + 2, even if you change your base system, 2 + 2 = 4 remains true numerically. Or in other words, if you have two objects and you combine them with two other objects, you have 4 objects. But then that means that it's not an abstract eternal truth. It's grounded in, like, when you say it's numerically true, that's you're describing like matter in the universe to me when you're doing that. So that's a little bit different. But anyways, let's take this idea of 2 plus 2 equals 4. Okay. Let's pretend that nothing in the universe doesn't even exist, but God and God's mind exists. And God's mind has the thought 2 plus 2 equals 5. Is that statement true, false, or meaningless?
God's mind has this. Well, it depends on how you really view God. Like if he has propositional knowledge, if he, I guess in some vague sense, it's true. It's a conditional truth to him that 5 plus 5 equals 10 in the back of his mind for all of eternity.
I don't know what you mean by that. A conditional truth. I don't know what you mean. If
Well,
God's the one that grounds truth claims, it sounds like they can't be conditional. It sounds like they're true. If God declares it, then it is true. But tell me what you mean.
Things. Well, yeah, there's two things to that. Well, one, I think that God's knowledge on something would be distinct from that thing. Like if he thinks about us, I think that's distinct from us actually. Like his thoughts of us isn't actually us. Two, I think that God can know something that changes. That doesn't mean his knowledge is changing. It's what he has knowledge on is changing. Like I can know about a chia toy, a chia, like that thing grows in the water, right? So God knows about a chia and chias grow. That doesn't mean like his knowledge is changing. It's just like that thing in its nature grows. So I think like you said, if you change the basis of something, unless you're talking about numerically, 5 plus 5 isn't always going to equal 10. It's depending on like if we're talking about materialistic things, what you're adding. If you're counting, it depends on what counting method you're deploying. But I guess like you were talking about numerically, 5 plus 5 equaling 10, then yeah, he would know that for all eternity.
I don't think you're using my hypothetical appropriately, because I said nothing in the universe doesn't even exist. The only thing that exists is God's mind. So there are no things that God can numerically equate the value of 2 toward. So it's literally just a universe. There is no universe. The only thing that exists is God's mind. And God says 2 plus 2 equals 5. So tell me, true, false, or meaningless?
Well, I still think that would be true. Like using the law of thought, like anything we think about would have to exist at least conceptually. So I think it would. I think you can numerically round concepts and stuff.
I think that it's meaningless. I think that it's utterly meaningless, because if you take the stance that it's true, then that doesn't. Then God could have had the thought 2 plus 2 equals 4, and so now all of a sudden the rules of mathematics are arbitrary. And so, like, the idea that 2 plus 2 is eternally true is literally false, because God could simply claim that 2 plus 2 equals 5, and then that would be true. I think that it's meaningless, but even if you say that it's true, I think it obliterates this, at least to me, this idea of that 2 plus 2 equals 4 is an objective, eternal truth.
Well, what about people what about Christians? That doesn't work for them because they believe in purus actus. There's no potential in God.
How would that be a remedy for this?
Because God doesn't. That means he couldn't have potentially made 2 plus 2 equal 5, because God is pure act. So there's no potential in God.
Well, then he's not omnipotent.
Well, he'd still be omnipotent. This is what they've held to forever, or a certain. I mean, there's so many denominations and sects, but
I mean, the amateur here, me, is hearing that and saying, "Oh, so God is constrained by logic. God can't say that 2 plus 2 equals 5," which he's either not omnipotent or the laws of logic don't derive from him.
Well, it's like this, right? What do you mean by he can't do it? Like, so the same way, like, would you say that God's not all powerful because he can't do bad things in Christianity? Because he can't do acts of evil?
So I'm okay with the idea that, because, like, I don't look for gotchas, because I think that that's just too lazy. But I do look for a contradiction isn't a gotcha. So, I look for those. I have always said I'm okay with the idea that God cannot do something that's logically impossible, like create a square circle. But then it's like, well, and you can still be omnipotent if that's the case.
Yeah, that's
But
true.
then God is constrained by logic, not the creator of it.
Well, it wouldn't be constraints. So look at it from this point of view, and I'm not gonna say that this is everyone's point of view, but this is the one that I've got responses for with the POE, the problem of evil, which is like, why doesn't he just erase evil and bad stuff, right? And these are a lot of the responses that I get most of the time that make the most sense to me personally. Like, logic would be a reflection of God's mind, right? And being all powerful, as you said, you can do anything that's logically permissible or possible. But the same way that you don't say God is bound by something when he can't do bad things, it doesn't mean that he's bound by this thing because he can't do it. It's outside of the parameters of how he acts, of his nature, like what makes God who he is, the personhood of God, right? And let's just say we had like a rational chipmunk and we gave him omnipotence, right? But let's just say it
Damn.
was in this chipmunk's nature, right, to never smile. It's just outside of his nature. In fact, a property of his nature is frowning. So logically, even though he's all powerful, he's not gonna smile. But we wouldn't say this means that he's not all powerful. It's just outside of what makes him who he is as a chipmunk, right?
I mean, I don't like the example because a chipmunk could smile because it's not a logical contradiction
Yeah.
or like impossible for a
No,
chipmunk to
with
smile,
what the
but it is
property,
impossible for a circle to be square, you know,
well,
for a
with the
triangle to.
property, with the property of it that I applied, that he's always frowning, the property of him constantly frowning.